What is Wisconsin's spot in the Big Ten? What does the brand look like? And let's talk football and basketball. Year number two going into Luke Fickell and a busy offseason for Gard and basketball. We'll talk about all of that and more with a very special guest on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Badger fans, welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create the account, get $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time with the code Locked On. And with that, with the great guest, man, we just jump right in. We got Patrick Herb, Assistant Athletic Director, Strategic Communications Football. Been on the show 3 times now. Just like Brady Collins, you're starting to unlock some tier bonuses. Very big moment for you, I'm sure, in this, among your other accomplishments.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoy coming on. And as with the other episodes, I am no shortage of words when I come on here.
No, we love it, man. Lots of people are excited for it. I want to start your media days. Football is going on. Fall camp is coming up. Where are we at year 2 going into Luke Fickell's second season, and what should the expectations for this program be?
Yeah, summer's over, man. It's done. We had media. I was in Indianapolis yesterday with the team for media day. We've got report day is on Monday. Camp starts on Tuesday in Platteville. So here we go. It's season time, which is fun. It's always a little bit sad when the summer's over, but not for most people. I still get the month of August. Year 2. So that was the big topic of media day yesterday for Coach Fickell and the 3 players that were there: Jake Chaney, Hunter Wooler, and Jack Nelson. And expectations. What are the expectations? What's different in year 2 from year 1? Those were the big kind of reoccurring themes. And I'll answer it, I think, similar to what the guys would say, that expectations are they don't ever put 10 wins or win the Big Ten championship. Those aren't things that necessarily talked about publicly from the team landscape. Obviously, they're competitors. They talk about those things, I'm sure, in the locker room, and they want to win every game. But I think showing growth offensively and defense in the new system is an expectation and is a goal of this program. Being competitive in every game is something, like being able to be on the same field with every team they play. It includes Alabama, includes Oregon and Penn State. Wisconsin has 4 of the top 6 projected finishers in the Big Ten on their schedule. So it's a challenge. But then the rhetoric that has always been talked about since Fickell was hired was competing for championships. And I know people might be tired of hearing that, or it's becoming cliched, but that's the truth. And so playing your best football at the end of the season, putting yourself in a position to play for a championship. So that means when October and November football hits, you're in the hunt for a Big Ten championship spot. And if you're in the hunt for a Big Ten championship spot, then you're going to be in the hunt for a CFP spot. And so I don't think it's fair to say if this team doesn't make the Big Ten championship, it's a disappointment. That's not what we're getting at, but that's the level of expectation that this program wants to have, and whether they can deliver in 2024, we'll find out. But that's okay. To say that that's the standard, that's what they want. And differences of year 1, year 2. I think Luke Fickell kept talking about the leadership and how that started to emerge late in the season last year. Particularly with some of the adversity, right? Some of it was in response to adversity, and then how it developed through the offseason and the things that he learned about Wisconsin as a program and the type of athletes that we have, the type of people that we have, and how to build the program in his vision after seeing it through 1 year. And some things that he maybe thought would be true coming in weren't, and some things that he didn't think would be true were true. And so I don't think it's at all a stretch to say that the program is in a different spot right now than it was a year ago, and a much stronger spot in terms of everybody having a collective message, collective identity, and collective vision towards what this program is.
Do you think there's a difference in the marketing from year one to year two potentially? And one of the questions we had was from Wisco Fanatic, how does the marketing approach shift from year one to year two? It seems like they're playing it closer to the best this year.
Sure, a little bit, I'd say. Yeah, part of our strategy when Luke Fickell was hired was to pour gasoline on this fire of excitement, and like, let's capitalize on it. Let's be able to sell tickets to it. Let's be able to recruit to it. Let's be able to get fan engagement to it. And so, if you remember, we had the launch in the spring, which was like a spring game, and just giving it a title and giving it a fancy branding was a little bit out of scope for what Wisconsin often operates. And that was an intentional thing to, again, pour gasoline on this fire that had started. There were some things that were out of our control as to why maybe year two didn't look the same. We tore up the turf in Camp Randall, so we weren't able to have a spring game. So I'm not saying we would have had the launch part two if we'd have had a stadium available, but that was one reason we didn't, for example, is that we didn't have the facility. But yes, I think the proof is in the pudding is a little more the approach in year two, right? Like, yes, now the excitement hasn't dwindled at all. The expectations haven't changed. But now we're into establish the program, and let's be excited about who's on this team. And we spent a lot of energy introducing people to Luke Fickell last year, and we're spending more energy, and we'll continue to introducing the athletes and the players, and getting you to know Tawi Walker, the new running back, and getting you to know John Pius and Jaheim Thomas, some of these transfers, some of the rookies and freshmen that are going to have an impact, and then some of the returning guys that people may not be that familiar with, James Thompson and Quincy Burrows and guys like that we're putting more emphasis on getting to know them.
Yeah, and this is just a theory I've had. It feels like last year, understandably so, everybody was so excited. And it feels like the pendulum has almost swung a little too far the other way in parts this year, where they've said, well, last year it didn't quite work out. I'm not going to give. And I don't think last year is this year. Like, I don't think you should look at last year and say, it wasn't quite what I thought. So this year I'm going to keep my expectations down.
Sure. Yeah, I've sensed that from the media a little bit, to be honest. And I think some media members are open about it, saying like, I hyped up the team too much. I'm not going to make that mistake again. We've seen that a little bit. I think you're right. Last year is very different from this year. I think you saw that this coaching staff got through the season, figured out where they needed to address some needs, and went and attacked those. I would look at the linebacker room as the shining example of them saying, okay, we got through a year, saw what we had, saw what we need, and then they went out and just totally restocked that room. And so, yeah, last year and this year are completely independent of each other. But I'm also, admittedly, I'm a person who says, I think we'll be better than last year, but the schedule is also harder. So will the record reflect the team being better? I'm not sure. We'll find out.
I can't wait for it. And speaking of just better schedule, which obviously incorporates some of those West Coast teams and new former Pac-12 teams joining the Big Ten. One of the questions I got from a lot of people knowing you'd come on, and this is from Kyle, where does Patrick view our brand in the greater landscape of college athletics? Top 10, top 15, top 20? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
This is an interesting conversation because of where college athletics, college football might be heading, right? With conference realignment that we've seen in the last handful of years, particularly the last 12 months, the SEC and the Big Ten have sort of separated themselves, I think, and have become universally recognized as the top two. And I think we'd probably be naive to think that this is done. The conference realignment is done. I know that Commissioner Petiti of the Big Ten yesterday said in his press conference, we're happy with 18 teams. We're focusing on those 18. Conference expansion is not on the radar right now. I'll take him at his word. I believe that. But I also think that it's impossible to predict what college football will look like in 5 years. And if we're headed to a model where there is more growth and there becomes one super league, for example, who's invited to that super league? Doesn't mean if you're in the Big Ten right now, you're automatically in the Super League, or if you're in the SEC right now, you're automatically in it. I have no idea. But this question in particular, the teams that are in that top 10, top 15, top 20, they're going to be in the Super League for sure, if there is a Super League. And so that's why I think this question is fascinating, and where Wisconsin's place is in that is fascinating. So that's a long preamble to my answer. I think Wisconsin is a top 15 program and brand for sure, maybe approaching top 10. And there's a few reasons I say that. One is the dual success of its football and basketball programs. That consistently over the last 25 years, Wisconsin is in that very small number of teams that have consistent success in both of the big revenue generating programs. Okay. That's one feather. Two, the alumni base and the TV ratings that occur when Wisconsin plays. That's major brand recognition territory for Wisconsin in those. Three, I look at the deal that Wisconsin signed with Under Armour. This was 8 years ago now, and so the contract renewal is in a time where it's probably getting pretty close. When Wisconsin signed that first contract with Under Armour, it was big time contract, and so Under Armour certainly viewed Wisconsin as one of the top brands at the time. I think it might have been their highest contract. Then they signed UCLA, have since dissolved their relationship with UCLA. But they view Wisconsin as a major brand, not just in their portfolio, but in all of college athletics. So like, I feel like those are data points that we can point to say, yeah, I feel pretty secure that Wisconsin is in that top 10, 15 range.
I love going to baseball games in the summer. I love it. I love it. There's nothing like it. Game Time is the number one spot to get to all your baseball games. It's the number one spot to get all your tickets, but right now baseball's where it's at. Go get your tickets to your favorite Major League Baseball team. It's the Brewers, whoever it is, over on Game Time. Our best prices, easiest way to find tickets, the biggest inventory, panoramic views of the seats before you sit down, so you know exactly who's going to sit to your left, who's going to sit to your right. It's all over there, over at Game Time. There's flash deals, so you get last-minute savings. You can't beat it. There's a reason this ticket marketplace over at Game Time has blown up. They've exploded because they've made it easier for you to get where you want to go, and whatever it is, sports, movies, concerts, theaters, fine. Bottom line this. The best prices, the biggest inventory, the easiest way to buy tickets. It's all over at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. That's a great answer. And I love your point about the consistent success in football and basketball. I mean, Wisconsin football is the third longest consecutive bowl streak in the country, which is incredible. It's up there with Georgia. And you look at the basketball side over the last 25 years, how many schools have made the dance more than Wisconsin? You know, Michigan State.
I think four. Yeah, right? Duke, Michigan State, Gonzaga, Kansas.
Yes. And none of those programs have the football bowl streak. So that duality of it is incredible at Wisconsin. And then you add in hockey, men's and women's. You add in volleyball, the success in the other sports. Let me ask you this then. As this moves forward, where does Wisconsin – and I actually want to get into Gard a little bit here in the basketball program, as we've seen him add some coaches, add Kirk Penny last year, add their development coach this year. How does Wisconsin continue to leverage kind of that top 15-ish brand and to continue building and keeping up? I hate to say the term keeping up with the Joneses, but that kind of is college sports now.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at it. Keeping up with the Joneses, or we are the Joneses, and other programs are looking to keep up with us too, right? If we are in that top 10, 15, then there's a whole level of schools that are envious of Wisconsin, and they're trying to sell the tickets like Wisconsin does. They're trying to get the TV high-profile spots that Wisconsin is. You look at our football Rolodex this year of the networks that we're playing on, and we're going to be – Fox is coming for the Alabama game and the big noon kickoff, and CBS is going to put us on for the Minnesota game after Thanksgiving. the Penn State and Oregon game, there's rumors about where those are going to be placed. And it wouldn't shock me if we're on NBC's nightly broadcast or our game at USC, right? So I think there's two ways to frame that, right, of the keeping up with the Joneses. So again, that's a preamble to your question. But I think that from a adapting standpoint, both our football and our basketball programs specifically, I think we're also seeing it to a different degree with women's basketball and hockey and volleyball and other sports. But I'll focus on the football and men's basketball for now, of trying to revolutionize and evolve what the program looks like from the inside out too, right? So you mentioned that men's basketball is beefing up their staff and bringing in people who have a little different perspective. So adding Greg Steamsma, somebody with NBA experience, international experience, can help from a coaching lens, but certainly also from a player development and a roster building standpoint. They made Mark Van de Wettering the chief of staff, which means his background was in administrative stuff, booking flights and working on details for the travel logistics and the logistics of running a team. Now he's tasked a lot with roster building and figuring out NIL partnerships and things like that. So evolutionizing how that works. On the football side, Luke Fickell met with local media yesterday for a while and was talking about some of the transitions that are happening in football also, and elevating certain people and bringing in new people. From not only are they allowed more coaches on the field, that was a rule that was passed, and we'll be announcing later today that they'll be adding some coaches in an assistant role, but then also in terms of management of the roster and a general manager type position, he hinted at possibly needing a salary cap type person. And there's news today leaking out that the NCAA is going to approve different roster limits for football, that the scholarship limit might go from 85 to 105. So what does that do? Now that's 20 additional scholarships, not only that you have to fund and find the money for, but then also manage. And what happens to the walk-on program when you raise 20 more scholarships? Are they allowed to have more, or is that 105? Is that the roster limit? These are things that haven't shaken out yet, but may not fall on the head coach to be making some of those puzzle piece decisions, if you will. More of a professional model in both football and men's basketball, of somebody who's working on the roster management side in addition to just the coaching them up.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And that's one of the questions we had for you. Now you brought it up. One of the questions we had was curious is from inside Wisconsin, thoughts on the additional scholarships. We kind of hit on it. And as you mentioned, you need to fund those. The very first thought I had is the same thing you thought of. And it's nostalgic, but that feels like maybe the end of, to some degree, the walk-on tradition at a place. And a lot of schools that wouldn't matter, but at Wisconsin, we all know like how incredible that tradition has been. And the players that come through there.
I'm looking at my bookshelf. There was a book written just recently, Walk On This Way, that is like a tribute to the walk-on success. And it's a great book. And you just flip through the pages and you're like, oh yeah, he was a walk-on and he was a walk-on. And it's all Big Ten caliber players. And it's been part of the secret sauce for Wisconsin. And like, let's be honest, that they've been able to, they're not bending the rules, but they're playing to their strengths of like, we've got these under-recruited, often in-state kids that we know are better than the recruiting stars would show. So let's bring them in, and then they'll earn a scholarship by the second or third or fourth year, and they become great players. So I don't know. I can't predict right now what that means, but I'm with you. Like, I have a soft spot in my heart for the Jim Leonards and the Jared Eberderis and the JJ Watt, and like these great stories of people who had to prove it even just to get a scholarship. And then turn themselves into great players.
And you mentioned the stars, but you get like the Brady Ewings. There's so many players that just played instrumental roles and were great culture team guys. It's an incredible program. I do want to shift over and talk to Greg Gard. We texted a little bit during the season when Chucky Hepburn left, and we kind of both said a lot of time, but like this one kind of stings. I want to start there. Like, what was the feeling inside the building, the program, when a guy like Chucky, and it's not that Wisconsin hasn't lost really good players before in the portal. This is not the first guy. It won't be the last. But he felt like the first guy that kind of shook Wisconsin fans.
Yeah. truthfully, Wisconsin has been insulated from some of the mass exodus that other programs have seen over the last several years. Like that. So there have been there have been several transfers. There have not been many that are, they go to another program and they flourish, right? Like Jared Uthoff is a good example of one that did get away that Wisconsin would have loved to keep. A lot of other ones transferred down. So so this year's offseason was maybe a little different in that vein. I think AJ Storer didn't necessarily surprise people. Connor Sejan maybe didn't even necessarily surprise people if they were paying attention to playing time and what his role had changed into. The Chucky one was a surprise, I think. But as you peel back and look at the reality of the situation and the financial component that he's allegedly receiving at Louisville, and I'm not doubting it. I just know that this stuff isn't really confirmed. It's not, these athletes are making business decisions, and if you're a traditionalist, maybe that's hard to hear, but it's the reality of it. And that was, so the reaction you asked about in terms of inside the program, it was, oh man, like he's one of us. We know he loves it here. And I know Chucky, it was not an easy decision to leave. He loves it here. He's got the Badger tattooed on his arm. This is a place that will always mean something to him. So the first one was like, it's too bad. And then the second reaction was, but I get it. And we can find another person to give us the productivity that Chucky did. Good player, didn't want to lose him, but he's an honorable mention All Big Ten player, right? So the amount of money that the NIL puzzle for collectives is something that has to be considered. That could Wisconsin have provided some of the NIL opportunities, or could the varsity collective have provided some of the opportunities that he's getting elsewhere? Possibly. Would that be the best way to construct the roster and to be handling athletes on the team? And I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is they were able to bring in 3 transfers that are all going to be instantly productive for this program. And I think that a little bit speaks to the evolution we were talking about earlier of the program, of being able to get in that game where it wasn't too long ago where this program didn't take any transfers. I think in the Bo Ryan era, they might have had 2, maybe. Zach Morley was a transfer from and then there might have been 1 or 2 others. Now, it was a different time. I know that, but being able to say, okay, let's look at our roster, see where our holes are and address our needs, and then let's go target some players and try to recruit them here. That's part of the evolution. And I'm excited about the guys they brought in. I really am. I think that they're buy low candidates. And I don't mean buy in a literal sense. I really don't. I mean it as the metaphor of these guys several of them were coming off injuries or playing at lower profile schools that Wisconsin might have been able to identify the undervalued athlete, get them here because we know they're going to flourish if they're given the stage and the opportunity that they are here. John Tanje is like a great example of that to me.
Yeah, I can't wait to see him play. Just the shooting. You look at this roster at times last year, there were some spots that Tyler Wall was not a perimeter shooter, really good in a lot of areas. So there was a lot of double teams sent Crowell's way, and then you have some non-shooters or some inconsistent shooters. I think next year's shooting is going to open up the offense, going to make it easier for Crowell. And then I think John Blackwell, what we saw last year, there's a big step in his game coming. I think next year, yeah.
This program has been its best when they could put 5 shooters on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the 2000 team that had COVID end their year. They won the Big Ten title and then had COVID end their year. That team had shooters at every spot. Even your big guys, Micah Potter, Nate Reavers, like those guys could step out and punish you from outside, and Pritzel and Trice and all these guys. The Final Four, the back-to-back Final Four teams. Nigel Hayes wasn't a big shooter his last 2 years, but if you remember that freshman year he was, and sophomore year he was a weapon from 3-point range. And then you surround him with Kaminsky and Decker and Gosser and Jackson and all Dukin, and all these guys could shoot. And next year's team might resemble a little more of that from a stylistic standpoint.
Yeah, and take that even a step further, right? It feels like you're bringing in some guys from programs where, yes, they'll benefit Wisconsin, but it feels like Wisconsin can benefit some of these players as well. bringing Xavier Amos into a bigger stage like this, bringing Cameron Hunter into a better program. It feels like that goes back to your point of Wisconsin being a brand that can kind of bring some of these players into the fold.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. Yeah, I agree that they're good for Wisconsin to bring in. That will help the program, but the program will help them too. And that's part of the recruiting pitch. Like, I've been involved in some of the recruiting discussions and presentations with basketball and talked with our our football recruiting staff about how they're selling the program and what their messages are. And it's a two-way partnership that we're trying to sell you on how you will benefit from being here, as much as we're trying to improve what we do and what our team looks like. That is a marriage that is really important from a two-way relationship.
Well, and we'll get you out of here in a few minutes. I have a couple more questions. But I want to talk about that point.
It goes fast with you, man. We're at 20 some minutes already. It goes fast.
We could do 2 hours of this. It would be so easy. And the people would love it, because every time you come on, I get great feedback and just ask me to have you back on again and again and again. So I always try to space it out. But yeah, we always try to keep it going. Is there a crosstalk between the recruiting departments, not just football and basketball, but in other areas too, and say, hey, how can we learn from this group? How can we learn from that group? I'm always curious with that, because there are different recruiting directors and personnel on each side. Yeah.
Yes. The short answer is yes. There is crossover. The staffs know each other. Given that this is a still newish football staff, they have not had the long relationships that maybe the previous staffs over on the football side did with basketball. That, the continuity of Wisconsin athletics is one of the things that I think has been one of our success differentiators, that there's been, even when there's coaching changes in football, they're still from the same tree, if you will. And obviously basketball is that way, that the Bo Ryan to Greg Gard transition was smooth, and they've had the same leadership style, if you will, or vision for the last 25 years. So now that there's a football staff that is outside the tree, if you want to say that, right? They're still relatively new. I know it feels like internally, we've been with this staff for a long time. They are still relatively new, and they're really just entering their second season. So there isn't a ton of crossover. Also, the fact that the Kohl Center and Camp Randall are a mile apart. It's not like their offices are next to each other and they're comparing notes, but they do have a lot of similarities in their presentations. And I know that there's questions being asked of, like, how do you guys frame the player development side of your program? Okay, great. Well, here's how we do it, maybe. And they do compare notes that way.
That's phenomenal. A couple, like I said, last couple questions here, and we have some we won't get to, but I'll shelve those, and hopefully we'll get you on again at some point. I had a couple questions about the transition from Barry Alvarez to Chris McIntosh as an AD. A couple questions here from Not Caleb. Curious about the transition, how Mac is different than Alvarez, and then another question down here, how that affected the athletic department. But yeah, maybe this one. How is Mac different than Alvarez? Obviously, he's an Alvarez guy, worked with Alvarez, played here. But what are some of the differences?
Barry Alvarez was maybe a little more outspoken publicly about certain things. Barry Alvarez was happy to be he knew the position he was in. He knew the platform he had as a legend in football, a legend in college athletics, that he was willing to be a part of national conversations, willing to be in the college football playoff committee and be a spokesperson for things. After he retired, he was a consultant for the Big Ten, being a part of change in athletics and being a mouthpiece for that. Chris McIntosh is a little more behind the scenes, I would say. Maybe part of that's because he's still a young athletic director, but he spends he's very analytic. Chris McIntosh is, and very smart, and his impact on the future of college athletics may not be seen publicly right now because his name's not all over. You don't read his name in the headlines a lot of weighing in on big issues. But don't mistake that for somebody who's not involved in the conversation. He is, and he's one of the right people that we want involved in the conversation. He's really sharp. He really is. Not that Alvarez wasn't, believe me, that's not what I'm indicating. That's one difference. He's taller than Barry Alvarez. That's another difference. But there are different leadership styles, and he's his own person. Yeah, he's cut from Barry Alvarez cloth, but he's his own person, and he has put his stamp on things in subtle ways to He hasn't turned the boat in any direction. That's not fair to say at all. But he has calibrated some things, I'd say. Even some internal design things. His office looks a little different than Barry Alvarez did. He just different stylistic things. It's brighter and more open whites. And Barry Alvarez had a lot of dark wood and trophies and things from his coaching career. And there's not a whole lot of decorations in Chris McIntosh's office right now. So stylistically, that's one little thing.
That's interesting. Last question here. We'll get you out on this one. This is from Rajiv. He asks, now that the Big Ten is coast to coast, any thoughts on efforts to grow the brand on the West Coast? And really, you can say the East Coast as well, but to engage Badger fans on the coasts.
Yes. The answer to that is yes. And it has begun. It actually had begun before the expansion of the Big Ten to adding these 4 teams. We have had multiple donor events in the last 2-3 years on both coasts. We did a pretty big one in Boston and New York City within the last couple of years. We've had a few two or three in Los Angeles area, another one in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. So we have already started increasing outreach in those communities. We know Wisconsin is a global brand. We know there are Badger fans everywhere. There's over 400,000 living alumni that are everywhere. And it's reflected whenever we play games in distant locations and have pep rallies and huddles and those kind of things. The amount of people that come out, some are traveling from Wisconsin, but a lot of them are locals who are so excited that we're in their footprint. We did one at Arizona State when we played football 10 years ago, whatever it was, that debacle ending. And we had I'm sorry to bring that up. But we did a huddle there, and the amount of Badger fans that are in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area, some of the snowbirds, that was a huge Badger huddle, and there were a ton of Badger fans at that. So those efforts have been in place for a while. But yes, I agree that I think the expansion of the conference to that West Coast does open up even more opportunity for us to target that area, East and West. The Varsity Collective took out advertisements in Times Square around recruiting day, signing day for football a year and a half ago. That's a be in that New York market type of idea. California, when Wisconsin plays at USC, I think there's a plane going down that will be full of fans, donors, etc. So yes, that's imports from here, but then there will be an event out there to welcome the Badger fans who live in that market, in that LA market, that yep, we're in your territory now, and you're part of the Big Ten. Come along with us.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait for that USC game either. He is Patrick.
You gotta get out there.
Please pick out. Can I hitch a ride? I'm in Wisconsin.
That plane, that extra plane. We'll have to find a way. Because you're in Wisconsin now, right?
Yeah, I moved. I'm still in my basement because my office is being built. That's why it looks like I'm broadcasting from a bunker. But yeah, I'm here. Like, we made it. So I'm excited. He is let me wrap this. He is Patrick Herb, Assistant Athletic Director, University of Wisconsin. Join us for the 3rd time. As always, awesome insight. Really do appreciate it, man. For everyone tuning in, thank you so much, and we will talk tomorrow.
All right. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thank you.